Welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys for going out of your way to hit that subscribe button, follow along on this journey, or just going out of your way to like and comment. Thank you for doing that. That really helps me and the channel out a lot. Now let's talk about consistency on the water, why some days you go out there and catch them really good and some days you don't catch them so good. And there's really two factors that play into that. One being the weather, barometric pressure, whatever you want to call it. Clouds, wind, rain, sun, they all affect the fish differently. And that is a big deal when you are mixing that with fishing pressure. Now, if you don't mix that with fishing pressure, let's say you fish a private lake, a farm pond where bass on that lake never see a lure other than the ones you throw, you typically can just go out there with whatever's in your tackle box and catch bass. So when you mesh the two together, barometric pressure and fishing pressure, then you get to see what really makes a public lake tough and why weather can be a big deal when it comes to what baits you choose. And like all my other videos explain to you why they stop biting a spinnerbait at a certain time and why you need a certain condition to catch them on a lipless crankbait and why there are some baits that just really work no matter what. And those are the baits that I like to seek fish out with. And if you see the really great fishermen out there, the ones that you see on TV that are consistent, they throw the baits that work most of the time. Now that's a very obvious thing, but as a fisherman, we get sucked into that one lure that we've caught our biggest bass on, or we just love to catch fish on, or we have a bunch of confidence in, and it's a bait that typically only works specific conditions. And I've talked about a spinnerbait being that bait. I've talked about a jig being that bait. I've talked about a lipless crankbait being that bait. And you can make fishing really tough on yourself if those are your favorite baits or those are the baits that you only throw. So I want to talk about a specific type of fishing where I love to go to a lake and seek out a crank and bite. Seek out a bite where you just can catch bass in pretty much any conditions with a crankbait. And this is more so shallow cranking and medium diving crankbaits. If you have fish that go out into that 5 to 6 foot range, then a medium crankbait is going to be great on your lake. But for the purpose of this video, let's just talk about shallow cranking, because no matter where you're at in the country, no matter what time of year, a shallow crankbait typically can catch some bass if you are throwing it in the right shallow water. So I'm not saying that you can just go way the back of a flat somewhere and go throw this in the summer months and catch bass on it. If you're going to catch fish on shallow targets, it's got to be somewhere near where a lot of fish live. Then they will use those shallow places. But for the purpose of this video, let's just talk about crankbaits, shallow diving crankbaits, and then I will get my point across a little bit better. So shallow crankbaits, this is going to work on a sunny day with no wind. Now, it's obviously not going to be the best scenario, but you can still catch fish on this bait. Blue skies, no breeze, slick calm. Now, you're going to have to change colors. You're going to have to really try to make this bait look real. And then you're going to also have to be a realist when it comes to how many bites you're going to get. So you should know how good your lake is. And depending on the conditions you have, sun and no wind being the very worst possible conditions, you should be able to say, look, I can lock this bait in my hand for the next 4 hours and I should be able to get 6 bites on it. Or I should be able to get 3 bites on it. Or maybe 2 bites. And depending on how your morning went, depending on how your day is going at that point, that's what you need to do. Now, I would love to tell you that you can lock a worm in your hand, you can lock a slow-moving bait like a shaky head or something, a magnum shaky head, and drag it around on the bottom, and that's great. That works, but it's really hard to find fish doing that. So the reason I talk about the crankbait is the fact that catches them in the spring, really good, catches them in the summer, catches them in the fall, and it catches them with any condition. Wind, rain, sun, doesn't matter. And that's a great searching bait because you can still fish it fast. It just looks the best in the water. If a bass is going to bite a chatterbait or a spinnerbait and you can still have the fish see your bait, they will bite a crankbait. You can't interchange those. If they bite a crankbait, I can't guarantee you that they'll bite any of those other baits. So that's what makes a crankbait so powerful. And why that is important for consistency is that you are going to constantly get weather changes. You're consistently going to get different fishing pressure changes. You know, if you go out on a lake, let's say a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, where you're most likely are having the least amount of people, you've had that Monday for the lake to kind of rest from the weekend traffic, those are going to be your best fishing days of the week. As you get later into the week where you start having people trickle in that are practicing for tournaments, maybe you're having pleasure boaters getting off early on Friday, they're getting out on the water, and you have the weekend crowd during the weekend, the fish have seen the most boats, they've heard the most motors, they've been pinged with transducers, they've been fished for. As that accumulates over time, by like Sunday or Monday, the fish are just shot. They are knowing that biting a lure, or biting in general, is trouble. It's a negative connotation with that. So they start to slow down. So that's when that window that I explained with the farm pond, where they'll pretty much bite any lure. Now, some lures are going to work better in some conditions, but they'll still bite every lure, is now condensed from the fishing pressure. So when we get to Saturday on that tournament, you better be throwing the right bait, and you better be a realist knowing how many bites you're going to get. So when I go back to why the crankbait is so good, you know, you can cover water, you can seek fish out. It's going to work no matter what the deal is. Very important to learn that. Very important to know that that's how you become consistent on the water. So when I show up to a lake, and I know I got to cover water because we're not in that time of year where there's a whole bunch of fish in one area and I got to fish all over the lake. When I'm doing that, a crankbait is going to be the best way to find fish, right? Well, let's say for some reason I say, man, I just want to throw a worm. I want to pick up a worm and swim that around. So I throw a speed worm out there and I swim around and I catch a 3-pounder. Well, no matter what, I have that in my back pocket that, hey, if I'm getting around some fish, that speed worm's going to catch them. I will still continue to evolve that cranking bite. I'll still continue to look for those cranking fish because I can throw everything about fishing pressure, barometric pressure, the weather, all that. I can throw that all out the window, and I know if I can catch a couple of fish right now on a crankbait, I'll be able to catch a couple of fish tomorrow on a crankbait. You know, as long as we don't have a water levels change or something like that, just thinking about fishing pressure and weather, if I can catch one today on a crankbait, I can catch one tomorrow. There's not a whole lot of moving search baits where you can do that. And the worm thing is, you know, one of those deals where if you can get them to bite a worm and they're good size, then you can carry that along. And that's like most baits that look natural and you fish them slow on the bottom. If you can catch a couple on them, you don't necessarily need the conditions to get better or stay consistent for it to work. You typically can catch those fish on that bait going forward. The downside of the worm and any slow moving bait, it's hard to find new fish with that. So that's where the crankbait comes in. Pivotal to your success in being consistent on the water. That's why it's so important to learn that bait. It'll make bass fishing a lot easier for you guys. Try that. Good luck to you, and I'll see you on the water.